Okay, let's see if this will work. This name of this story is The Cherry Tree Carol, and I don't think this song is going to actually be part of the performance piece, but I just think it's good for you to know it. It might be nice to reference it musically, and we can figure that out later. So it's called The Cherry Tree Carol. This is an old American carol. It's actually pentatonic, and I think it's from Appalachia. I think I know it from Joan Baez singing it. When Joseph was an old man was he. Oh, it's too low. When Joseph was an old man was he. He married Virgin Mary, the Queen of Galilee. He married Virgin Mary, the Queen of Galilee. Then Mary said to Joseph, so meek and so mild, Joseph, gather me some cherries. Oh shit, are you okay?
Fine, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I just gotta do this video.
Yeah.
I am with child, Joseph, gather me some cherries, for I am with child. Then Joseph grew in anger grew he. Let the father of thy baby gather cherries for thee. Let the father of thy baby gather cherries for thee. Then Jesus spoke a few words spoke he. My mother wants some cherries, bow low down, cherry tree. My mother wants some cherries, bow low down, cherry tree. The cherry tree bowed down to the ground, and Mary gathered cherries while Joseph stood around. And Mary gathered cherries while Joseph stood around. Okay, so that's the song I've had in my head for the past 40-some years. So here's the story, The Cherry Tree Carol. We all know about Gabriel flying in through the window to tell Mary the news. I think she passed out. But he stayed with her, laid his hands on, and talked her through it, convinced her she could do it maybe, or simply that there was no choice. But no one talks about an angel coming to Joseph. That's because there was no angel. It was just Mary that told him, and she was no angel. In fact, Joseph's mother and others had raised some questions about her parentage, not the kind of family. No, Joseph didn't go for those angelic types, not the good girl Marys who are quiet and wait on you hand and foot. It was more the Martha type of Marys that got his attention. And this particular Mary who rarely missed those late night strategy sessions around Sam's kitchen table. Yes, as he neared his 5th decade, Joseph had accepted that he'd never marry, never have a child. It was actually a relief. Even his mother had finally stopped it with the hints, the surprise meetings with her friend's spinster niece at the market. He didn't really need to leave his mark on the world on this world in that way. Not when you have the satisfaction of the smooth wood under your fingertips, the precision of the joinery, the systematic progress from foundation to rooftop. And the late nights at Sam's gave him a sense of something larger. Even though Sam was always harping on about his messianic visions, Joseph knew that strengthening the guild, those incremental increases in a day's wages, insisting that a man could choose freely which work to engage, stopping to observe the Sabbath, no matter how the Goyim carried on about their deadlines. Sam wouldn't let up about some Messiah being on the way, but how could a Jewish visionary even live long enough to get anything done? Surely he would be crucified like so many already. But the messianic hoopla mixed freely in those late night conversations, and it was part of the coming together, the solidarity, even across the trades, as they realized their brotherhood surpassed all illusion of competition. Not just a more unified front against the Roman dogs, but something different than what those fancy Talmudic scholars expounded. The 99%, they knew something. Hard to put a finger on what it was, but it came from listening to the wood, the well, the donkey, and the cobbles under hoof. So when he realized how disappointed he would be the nights Mary failed to show, or he wondered all day what she might think of his latest attempt to engage the stonemasons, he realized something was different. And even more surprising how this smooth-skinned woman so full of flesh, her eyes would seek him out in the corner, how she'd twinkle her remarks in his direction. My God, is this what you intend for me? The engagement was marked by no ring, no party, just him asking so humbly and her saying yes. In terms of a wedding date, they deferred to his mother's request for springtime. Mary was certainly not the one she had had in mind even before she had given up, and her son's foolishness might not last so many months, or Mary's pretense of loyalty. No proper woman stayed up late in a room full of men or meddled in affairs beyond her realm. By springtime, her true colors would show. There would be a chance for saving face. So it was no angel who broke the news to Joseph. Mary's body spoke, as it would so often do, but this time in a new language. They had all been a little queasy that month. It seemed the lamb stew at Sam's had been too long in the pot. But as the days passed, Mary still could barely keep anything down. Joseph brought her broth from his mother's, and she sipped it as best she could. As her strength returned, the cravings began. First pomegranate, and then, that day on the road, a cherry tree, of all things. She had to have some. Awkward, since they were already late for the gathering, the one where a few masons had promised to show. Really, Mary, the branches are so high, I don't have my ladder here on this road. Can we please just keep going? And then she burst into tears. He had never seen her cry, hadn't thought of her like that. And she told him, well, what do you expect? No man is going to take that news gracefully. How could he? After so many years of letting it go, seeing other men fall and descend into the drama, the fighting, the hot-blooded mess. Then the children and more children. Yes, he had seen the joy in that, but also the hunger, the traveling wider for more work to feed more mouths, his friends growing older before his eyes as their lives narrowed down, stooping to shoulder it all. It was why so many had lost sight of the cause, giving in day to day. And then after all this, him too finally giving in to what God had in mind, the particulars of the way his body and hers were made to make more bodies, the endless chain of flesh, him not exempt after all. Lineage, in the basest sense, with all its pains and joys, he had submitted to this, the power of her presence irradiating his plans. And now, just as his mother had predicted, she throws it all back in his face, that thing he had never really wanted anyway. She had dangled it there until he bit, hooked. Now he sees it only was bait. But she's there in front of him, crying by the side of the road, the cherries high overhead, telling him about the angel at the window, clouds moving quickly. Suddenly he knows that plans are what you make so God can laugh. Suddenly he doesn't care who it was that might have taken her home or slipped something in her wine. This damn angel at the window. Suddenly he loves her no matter what. And this child, this puffiness under her dress, this fullness of her breasts, this glow in her face, it is a miracle. And already he is acquiescing to the crazy name she will be choosing. She's sure it's a boy, not something from scripture, no Samuel or Isaac. Some crazy name like Jesus. Probably she heard it from those guitar-playing Spaniards. Suddenly, he becomes the man who can accept everything. God knows his family genes aren't the be-all and end-all. Maybe the child could escape the forward-thrusting neck of his father, the nervous rolling of thumbs against forefingers or chewing on the tongue. Maybe this child would be exempt from the family chain of worry, or tall enough to really play basketball. He is suddenly there at the doorway alongside every anxious blue-eyed father who wonders about his brown-eyed son. The dark-haired man whose bald baby girl's hair comes in blonde, looking so much like his brother. Or the baby born a few weeks too early when you count the months he had been afield with the sheep last spring. How often they do love anyway. So Joseph stood around there with Mary, the side of the road. Some coins found their way out of his pocket into the nimble hand of the climbing urchin who showered cherries down into her laughing cloak. And Mary's lips and fingers were stained with the dark red juice. There would be no black eye, no bruises on her belly, no red letter A. He stood around where she was until she had eaten her fill and they went on down the road, more late than ever, more in love, more tiny in the world whose growing wonder could open doors wider than he had ever imagined, rolling back the stone at the tomb of hope.